The midday sun spilled across the open courtyard of the private airport, casting sharp shadows on the gleaming white jet that stood proudly in the hangar. A handful of well-dressed executives and airline staff gathered near the aircraft, their polished shoes clicking against the smooth concrete floor. The scent of jet fuel mixed with fresh polish filled the air. In the middle of this carefully composed scene entered a man who seemed almost misplaced, like a forgotten brush stroke on a perfect canvas. He was thin with skin darkened by years of sun, his cheeks hollow but strong, and his hands calloused from decades of hard work. His shirt was tattered and stained with dirt from the fields, his trousers frayed at the hem, and his straw hat bent out of shape. A worn leather bag dangled loosely from his shoulder. As he walked forward, heads turned, smirks curled on lips. A few whispered behind their hands, chuckling at the sight of a man who looked like he had wandered out of a village farmyard into a world of billion-dollar jets and luxury suits. Before the story unfolds further, if you believe in kindness, in the power of second chances, and in never judging a person by appearances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps spread these meaningful stories of humanity to the world. The farmer's name was Raghav Sharma, a man whose life had been defined not by comfort but by toil. For most of his 70 years, he had risen before dawn, working the soil with his bare hands, enduring harsh summers and unforgiving rains. While others dressed in pressed shirts and polished shoes, Raghav wore what he could afford: patched clothes, old sandals, and the same straw hat he had worn for nearly 2 decades. To outsiders, he looked like nothing more than a poor aging farmer clinging to the scraps of a hard life. But what they did not know was the truth Raghav carried within him. A truth that was invisible beneath the layers of dirt and dust. For decades, Raghav had quietly bought lands others abandoned, patiently tending them, nurturing them until they flourished again. His farmlands stretched further than most could imagine across states, valleys, and hills. He supplied grains, fruits, and vegetables not only to his country, but to markets overseas. His investments, carefully chosen, multiplied over the years until his wealth surpassed that of the very men laughing at him now. Yet he never changed his way of life. He never cared for golden watches or shining suits. His joy came from working the land, hearing the rustle of crops in the wind, and watching young farmers he trained grow into prosperous men. As Raghav stood by the jet, one of the young executives leaned toward his colleague and whispered loudly enough for him to hear, "What is he doing here? Must have lost his way from the fields." The group chuckled. Raghav lowered his eyes, not out of shame, but out of patience. He had heard words like these all his life. When he walked into banks years ago to secure loans, clerks had mocked his torn clothes. When he went to markets to sell his produce, traders sneered at his appearance. He was invisible to them unless he had money to offer. But today, the irony was sharp. The very jet they were preparing belonged to him. The hangar echoed with laughter until a man in a dark navy suit approached Raghav, his smile wide, his confidence unshaken. His name was Aditya Malhotra, an ambitious manager who prided himself on networking with the wealthy. He pointed a finger directly at Raghav's chest and said mockingly, "Old men, this is a private facility. You don't belong here." Behind him, the staff and attendants stifled laughter. To them, this was entertainment, a man out of place in their world. Raghav's gaze lifted, his wrinkled face calm, his eyes carrying decades of storms they could never fathom. He did not argue. He did not shout. He merely stood quietly, his silence unsettling enough to break the rhythm of their mockery. Then from the far side of the hangar, the airport director arrived with 2 assistants, his voice carrying authority as he spotted the scene. "Mr. Sharma," the director said respectfully, "your jet is ready. The pilots are waiting. Would you like us to arrange refreshments before your flight?" The crowd froze. The laughter died mid-breath. Adifir's face drained of color as he realized the man he had ridiculed was not a beggar, not a lost old farmer, but the owner of the very jet behind them. Murmurs spread like fire, the women in uniform gasping quietly, their smiles faltering into awe. Raghav nodded politely to the director and walked past the stunned group. He did not gloat, nor did he throw their insults back at them. He had lived too long, seen too much to waste energy proving himself to those who measured worth by fabric and shine. Instead, he climbed the stairs into the jet, his steps slow but steady, his head held high. Inside, as the aircraft hummed to life, Rugov sat by the window, gazing out at the runway. His mind drifted back to the early days when his wife stitched his clothes late into the night, when his children went to school barefoot because shoes were too costly, when he sold his first harvest at a price so low he nearly gave up. He remembered the ridicule of neighbors who called him foolish for buying barren lands, the taunts of traders who dismissed him as a nobody. He remembered the pain but also the grit that carried him through. The jet rose into the sky carrying with it not only a men but a lifetime of perseverance. Below, the very people who mocked him stood silently, their pride shattered by the lesson they had just witnessed. Never judge a soul by the clothes they wear. For wealth, true wealth, cannot be measured in fabric or gold. When the jet leveled above the clouds, Raghav closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for the riches, not for the lands, not even for the power of owning fleets of aircraft, but for the strength to remain the same humble farmer he had always been. His fortune never changed his heart. He still walked the fields every morning, still gave away food to the hungry, still funded schools in villages where children had no hope. That was his true wealth. The wealth of giving, of kindness, of humility. And so the story of Raghav Sharma is not about riches found in banks or contracts signed in glass towers. It is about the richness of spirit, the quiet dignity of a man who rose above mockery without bitterness, and who reminded the world that appearances deceive but character reveals. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every small act of engagement helps us bring more such inspiring tales to light.